Well, folks, I'm back. I'm going to fly solo for a little while. Welcome back to the 2013 TAT Summer Classic. We are at the Orleans Hotel Casino in steamy hot Las Vegas. My co-host, Mr. Flanagan, hasn't made it back yet from across town, so hard telling when he's going to be joining me, but I'll try and do my best to hold the fort down by myself for a little while. See if we can't get somebody up here in the booth to join me sometime soon. So if anybody has any questions they want to throw at me, feel free. We've got our 3 cameras going on the 1 o'clock squad. Looks like there's about half the bowlers that we had on the early morning squad. Looks like we have 2 on each pair across the way. They're using lanes 3 through 32, it looks like. So once again, we're still using lanes 11 and 12, 17, 18, and 23 and 24 for our feature pairs. And again, this is a scratch and handicap event, a little mix of everything going on. Still a few familiar faces out there that have bowled multiple squads. Looks like Steve Kloempken's going to join me again for a little while. Welcome back, Steve.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be back.
Did you get to grab a little something for lunch?
Yeah, nice little snack, and also was down in the ballroom helping lay out a few balls for some of the competitors, and again, I kind of got a little bit of that same feel again. Everyone's trying to not really manage the amount of hook left to right, but trying to get that break point in the right position and managing the amount of length that they get out of it. And it seems like players if they get the ball into a roll, sometimes it's a little too soon, and then if they get the ball going too far down the lane, then it skids too far. So they feel they're seeing the challenge in terms of the lengthwise break point and the motion from the foul line to the pins, not so much left and right, because I think everybody knows on this type of a condition, if you get it inside, it's going to hook. If you feed it outside, it's going to go a little bit too long. So that seems to be pretty constant amongst all the players.
Seems to be the theme so far. It does look like there's a little bit of hold if you can get far enough left. It's more of that spare ball hold than it is true hold. But if you can find a little shim to work with, be able to get the ball through the fronts and then get the right angle down lane, that's almost starting to look like the part of the lane that's going to be the cleanest. So it's just a matter of if you can get there and still bowl your game.
And speaking of bowling your game, Willie Wells, I don't know if you just saw that last shot from him on lane 16, but I tell you what, he's got a slower ball speed with a lot of revs. He kind of grabs around the side of it and opened up the back end of the lane with his kind of unique play. But he's got a ball that looks like it's a little bit cleaner, like kind of highly polished, just because he has a little bit of that slower speed. So again, he's trying to sort of manage that length. Now, Cameron Foster, he's on 19 and 20 right now, just threw a triple, 7th, 8th, and 9th, and looks like he's using an IQ Tour Pearl, and in between 15 and 20 at the arrows, getting the ball down the lane. Break point was a little bit tighter, but going with a little bit lower flare, I think that kind of helped him control the back end of the lane a little bit. So, but he looks like he has a good look there. He's clean through 9 frames with the triple, so he's got 230 left. See, Willie's going for a triple here with a strike in the 9th. A little deeper. Ooh, he's inside of 20. Cut it off. Ooh, big 4.
It's kind of like what we talked about a little bit on that last squad, that if your normal game is to kind of grab it, hit it, you definitely have to be a little bit cleaner with the release on a pattern like this, just to be able to control the motion down lane.
Well, you sure do. Yeah, if you get around if you do grab it, you get around the side of it, as soon as that ball sees friction, it has a tendency to take off. You can't create any hold that way. That's one of those times where you really got to look for a little bit cleaner release, maybe even a little bit more end over end roll. Maybe it's not, we were talking about those physical game adjustments before. We were talking about adjusting the speed, adjusting your rev rate. That's one of the things. But you also got to look at, you trying to go up the back of the ball a little bit versus getting your hand off the side of the ball. On this pattern, boy, you get your hand around the side of the ball, unless you really project it when that ball sees friction, it's
going to want to go sideways.
It's going to want to go sideways down lane, and then that's where the challenge comes in. That's what helps keeps the scores down from where you would see them if the condition was a little bit more wide open. Looks like the scores are doable, though. You know, it looks like if you do get matched up, I'm seeing some scores here right in front of us. We've got a 226 and a 237 possible left here on 19 and 20, and some of the players are putting all those variables together and kind of come up with the right solution. So it's definitely doable, and scores are reachable, but you gotta be matched up. Harry Mickelson with a nice shot there. Ooh, he's got 187 in the 8th, and that's on 21 and 2.
You know, one thing we have taken into consideration is looking at some of these scores. You know, the handicap that some of the bowlers are getting. So we may be seeing some 220 games from people that are getting 15, 20 pins a game handicap that could add to those scores. So once again, we're not given scoring updates very often. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've seen one in a couple of days. I do know that they update the website with scores after squads. So make sure you go to trueamateurtournaments.com for the rules, format, scoring updates, things like that. There's a lot of information there that they have, but once again, like Steve and I explained a little bit earlier, kind of our job this week is to just have some bowling, you know, on camera. You know, give some of these bowlers out there a chance to bowl on TV, so their family and friends can watch them back home. We're gonna, you know, archive some more video that we're bringing, you know, live bowling to the masses. Give us a chance to get out there, kind of talk about the sport, talk about the education of the sport, call a little bit of the action, you know, kind of give you guys a description of what's going on. But for the most part, this is a little bit different than some of our normal broadcasts where we're actually doing play-by-play and things like that. We're going to be just talking about other topics as well. So there are a lot of different aspects of this event. You've got the qualifying rounds, you have the chance tournaments, you have the marathon entries. As Steve mentioned earlier, you have the 9-pin no-tap sweeper squads tonight. You've got the Storm Challenge tomorrow night. So there's a lot of different things going on at this event, and that's what makes events like this, you know, great. Is you can come out here for the week and literally bowl all day, every day, having a chance to, you know, make some money here and there. So good opportunity for a lot of different bowlers, a lot of different ages, a lot of different skill levels. So.
And as was mentioned here as well in the chat, is that there are both scratch and handicap divisions. So, you know, if you are a scratch player, you know, it doesn't have to be that you're competing against only handicap. It is division based. So,
now, if I'm understanding it correctly, based on what I overheard earlier, if your average is over, I believe, 205, you had to have bowled this event for the last 5 years or so to be eligible. After the, you know, if it's been within the last 5 years and your average is over that, then you are not eligible for this event. But there are some guys here that have been bowling this event for a number of years, so that that keeps them eligible to keep coming back and bowling this event.
if they're trying to get that particular handicap.
Right.
Or you could just bowl the scratch as well, but, which is still age-based, so it's still fair based off of that experience. Yeah. And one of our competitors there just came and asked us where they can see this live streaming in action, just so we can make sure that his friends and family are able to watch him compete. And that's InsideBowling.com, as you know, participating in the show here. a lot of players excited to get a chance to bowl on TV. And Jeff, you probably know, going back a few years now, but the World Team Challenges, you know, that was one of the things that a lot of the players that have bowled in that tournament over the past years were always excited about. The chance was to be able to compete on TV. And that's one nice thing that you do get when you're participating in an event that has live streaming, is you get to bowl pretty much on a world stage. You know, anything in the World Wide Web, you get an opportunity to bowl under the lights and kind of get that feeling for what it's like to bowl when the cameras are on.
Absolutely, and I think that that was something that years ago, a lot of the amateur bowlers, that was a good opportunity for them to showcase their talents. You know, it wasn't only the PBA Tour on ABC back then, but you know, if you were lucky enough to be on a strong team in the World Team Challenge, you know, I know back then it was on all the sports channels on satellite radio, carried those. So that's where we got a lot of our first glimpses of Tommy Jones, Chris Barnes, Mika. I remember that, you know, one of the very first times I ever saw Mika was on the Turbo 2-in-1 Grips World Team Challenge team with Bob Learn and Ted Hannas and Billy Hoffman and those guys bowling together. And then, you know, you made some of those telecasts with the college team, and you know, you had Barnes and the Wichita guys and the Nebraska guys all bowling, you know, against each other in World Team Challenges, and it was really neat. And what's cool is a lot of those are archived on YouTube. You know, there are some people that have gone through and put those telecasts up on YouTube, so you can actually go watch, you know, a lot of players that you know now way back before anybody knew who they were, or you could see guys that you haven't seen in 15, 20 years. You know, you can go watch Mike Newman or Rudy Kazamakis. You can watch those guys back in their heyday, some of those great teams, even the old Saz's Barbecue team with, you know, Brian Brazeau and all those guys bowling together. So that was always pretty awesome.
Yeah, a lot of great players from around the country, and I know there's still some times where we're kind of cursing YouTube, right? When somebody sends you an email with a link to, you know, one of those old shows that you're on, and they, you know, they get that smiley face.
Yep.
But you're right; it's a great source of some of the history of our sport. And the other nice thing to look at it for is to just kind of see what some of the strategies were of some of these different players playing on flat. I mean, those conditions were brutal.
They were.
You would look at the qualifying, the teams that made the TV show back then. You look at the qualifying averages. A lot of the individual players, you bowl your 6 games, one 3-game set in the morning, 190. You shoot 570, 580. That was a great set back in those days on those conditions.
How many of those shows did you make? Do you remember?
I made 12.
12?
Yeah. Yep. And there were, and again, Baker game. There was a lot of, I mean, fortunate enough, I was on 4 winning teams, so that was great. But there was a lot of times those winning scores for a 2-game Baker match. You know, if you shoot 380 to 410, that was an outstanding 2-game Baker match score under the light. You know, you got the cameras, and Earl Anthony was announcing. And
right.
There's a lot of great history there. That was fun times.
I remember we won one, and unfortunately, it was after the television deal had fallen apart. It was a lot of fun, actually. It was myself, Paul Nicholas, Bobby Jekyll, and Billy Mons, and we'd all known each other for years and good friends and had good team chemistry. And I remember the first person that we had as our 5th was Vernon Peterson. He was the first person that we had asked, and he couldn't due to a prior commitment. So then we asked Del Warren. Well, Del couldn't do it, so then we end up with this guy that only Billy Mons knew out of Detroit. His name was Jason Lewis. And Jason came down and bowled with us, and
I know Jason.
And J. Lou fit in great with us. I mean, he was a perfect fit for our team.
Great guy.
We had a blast, and we were bowling in Vernon Hills up in Chicago at Bill Spigner's place, which is one of my favorite bowling centers in the country, by the way. And they were absolutely brutal. I mean, the lanes were just absolutely impossible. If you got it right of 10 at any point on the lane, the ball just laughed at you. And we had such a good time. We bowled well. We led qualifying, and then we come back the next day, and Tom Bodecker, who was the tournament director at the time, decided we're going to do away with the carryover pins this week. So the rules changed right in the middle of the event. So we start off losing.
They were flexible.
They
That's
were.
what you were saying.
They were more like
flexible.
guidelines than rules. So we start off 0-4 in match play, and we're in last. And then out of nowhere, we just started winning games, and we made the top 3 roll off, and we had to bowl Mike Nape's team first. It was Mike Nape and Benny Huffs, and I can't remember who else was on that team now off the top of my head. But then we won that game. Then we had to bowl Jeff Riggles, Mike Shady, Mark McDowell. We had to bowl their team. I can't remember if Steve Richter was on the team at the time, but Gail Myers was there. So one of the tougher teams, in the Midwest. So that was a lot of fun going through, that whole process, making it to the Grand Champions to come out here. It was at the Castaways at that time. So that was one of the highlights of my career, and it had nothing to do with PBA, and it had nothing to do with individual bowling, but, we had so much fun bowling together as a team, and, that's part of the reason why I brought back our team challenge. We used to host a PBA regional, and now it's a team challenge in September. My goal was to try and revive team bowling, and, at least we got a little bit of a start on that last year.
Yeah, team bowling, I can vouch for that. What a great experience that is. And it is cool. I mean, in team bowling, really nowhere is it any more prevalent and prominent than you see it in college bowling.
Right.
College bowling competitions, if you haven't had a chance to go to one of the modern day college bowling tournaments, boy, it's exciting when you see 5 people just very, rooting for each other, and it kind of brings back the and that was the original intent, I think, of the World Team Challenges, was to start bringing back the team bowling, and when you get 5 people on a lane rooting together for the team, there's just so much more enthusiasm when you bowl well by yourself. You're happy for yourself, and generally everyone else around you in the tournament's not quite as happy that you're bowling well. So.
Yeah, in the collegiate ranks, nobody sits down. There's a lot of energy, going on,
yeah.
and it's cool to be a part of it. It's those events are definitely fun to go watch. So once again, Jeff Carter, Steve Kloempken coming to you from the Orleans Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas for the 2013 TAT Summer Classic. This is the second of, was it 3 qualifying rounds today?
That's correct, yeah.
Second of 3 qualifying rounds today. We had, I believe, 3 or 4 yesterday. So they're bowling 3-game rounds. This is more of a sprint than it is a marathon. They did not re-oil the lanes in between squads. So, you had asked me, last round, what was my strategy going to be? I would make sure that I loaded up on all the late squads. I'd make sure that every day I hit the last squad of the day, because, that would fit my game the best, is when they're broken down the most. So that would definitely play into, I would hope would play into my hands. But, we can see over here on 19 and 20.
Dave Gwendon, great
Dave
player.
Gwendon, who is, I would almost say, legendary. He's won, a few megabuck events, and he's very, very well known in amateur bowling ranks. One of those guys from New York that easily could have competed at a high level on tour if he had chosen that path.
Yeah, I can tell you one of the most memorable shots. I remember driving down Nellis Boulevard and Boulder Highway. This was 18 years ago or so. There was a video of him actually competing in the American Dream Classic, $100,000 first place prize back at Samstown, right? And he bowled. Not only was he the tournament leader, they have a 1-game match for $100,000. He bowls 300 for $100,000, and it had his winning shot. I remember on that big marquee. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I still remember that
player.
one. And he was extremely deep. And even back then, most people that weren't involved in the megabuck circles back then never saw a ball go down the lane left of third arrow.
Right.
I mean, we're talking, back when, before bowling had really exploded into the power game. But I remember watching him on that show thinking, how is he doing this? That's incredible. And it was very neat to see guys like we mentioned Mike Newman earlier and several other guys that really kind of cut their teeth in events like this over the years. It was really interesting to see, in some cases, how they were ahead of time, in the way they did things.
Yeah, I think a lot of us as bowlers learned from guys like Dave who did that with success. You never really think about playing that deep and under that kind of a pressure. I'd be thinking, a little bit more conservative. But wow, I mean, talking about going for the gusto right there, 100 grand on the line. He wasn't thinking about just hitting the pocket and making spares. I mean, he was putting the pedal to the metal, as they say.
Another one that comes to mind is Brian Kretzer, and it's very funny that hearing Brian tell stories about the late 90s and the early 2000s on the amount of money that he made in the amateur ranks before he joined the tour. And for those of you that are familiar with Brian's game, Brian used to take anywhere from 9 to 17 steps. I mean, it really varied. And the reason why he did that was because walking around ball returns and learning how to do that in these late squads, late sweepers, so on and so forth, and having to manipulate his body to get into position to go extreme left to right angles. And it was always kind of cool to hear or see him back then, and then see how his game has developed now since he's been on tour for a number of years. But he was another one that did some things that were just amazing back then that you just never saw anybody do.
Yeah, I asked him once, too, I remember a long time ago, about his unique style, just because back then, I think a lot of bowlers now walk left, but back then we were always taught to walk towards your break point. And I asked him once about that, about how he developed that, and he had kind of an interesting story, which was that the reason that he had learned to, or not even really learned, but the reason that he walked left so much is that he had broken one of his legs playing soccer
right.
when he was a kid.
Not a lot of people know that Brian was a tremendous soccer player growing up.
That's right, yeah. And he broke his leg playing soccer, and therefore he kind of developed this sort of a kind of a hobble,
gait, yeah.
kind of a hobble walk a little bit that kind of brought him over, so he wouldn't walk a straight line. It kind of drifted him, and little does he know at that time this is going to end up turning into one of his biggest assets in his game, was being able to do that and do it consistently. And then be able to project the ball down there so easily to the right. So he could open up the heads like no other. Vic Meyerhoff, who's on 13 and 14, great player. He's got the front 5-9 spare. He was using looked like it was a Lucid with some surface or some texture, which personally, just from being down on the showcase lanes, I think is a really good choice here, unless you're a real high rev player. But if you're more of a tweener or a stroker, I think that's a really good option for this pattern.
So I think even if you are a higher rev rate player, and this is something that not a lot of people take into consideration, is instead of polishing a ball, sand it up even smoother. Still gives it a little bit of a sheen to it, which gives you a little bit more controlled down lane. Using polish is just simply going to make it skid more and read the friction harder, whereas if you take the ball to 2,000 or 4,000, you're going to get a similar amount of skid, but it's going to be much smoother down lane. It's not going to want to jerk off of the back of the pattern as soon as it sees the dry. So I can't remember the last time I actually polished a bowling ball. It's been years since I actually put a ball on a spinner and polished it.
And there are people who do call our tech line at Storm a lot that are asking about, how can they get the ball back to factory condition, whether it's a polished finish or whether it's something with texture. But if you do go on to stormbowling.com, you can go under marketing and the downloads, and there's a section in there that has a resurfacing guide that does have all that information on how to return that ball to factory finish. But I can tell you, when you do have speaking of polished bowling balls, when you do have a factory shine ball, it can be difficult to get that same exact amount of, replicate the kind of pressure that we have that's applied to the bowling ball in the plant. So when you're looking at a piece of industrial machinery like that actually shines the balls, uses that much pressure. We use the same products that you can purchase on stormbowling.com. We use the same step 1, 2, and 3 and extra shine and such. We use those products. But to be able to replicate the environment can be challenging. But what we did is we gave you the steps in terms of time-wise and products-wise, and what would be a good starting point to use for, what do you have to do to get the ball back to 1500 grit polish finish, or what do you have to do to get it back to a 2000 grit Abralon matte finish? We've got all that information on the website. And Vic Meyerhoff, we mentioned before, he did the front 5 and 9 spare. Here off to a great start in the squad. And he actually is the Northern California Proprietor of the Year.
It's not pretty tremendous honor.
Quite an honor. So not just a great bowler, but obviously does a fantastic job running his bowling center. I think it's Presidio Bowl, I think is the name of it. And apparently does a very awesome job there as well. So congrats to that. He's actually up on the approach here, and take a quick look here and see how he's playing the lanes. Obviously has something figured out here because he's looking very comfortable.
Kind of see him just off to the left on your monitor here. Flat 10.
Pretty good shot, left a soft 10.
But this is one of those situations where 9 spares a good frame. If you can pick up your doubles and triples here and there, make your spares and move on. I still think that that's the way to go. When you get yourself into trouble is when you start to think that every pair is a 250, 260 pair. You have to really be aware in events like this what the scoring pace is. What's the qualifying number, that the targeted qualifying number, and once you have an understanding what the scoring pace is, don't always continually try and bowl over that pace. Try and bowl to that pace. I always use the U.S. Open as a baseline or as an example. When you go bowl the U.S. Open, to cash, it's usually around 50 or 60 under to cash. It's usually around 100 to 150 or so over to make match play. So, with that coming after 18 games, do the math and you can figure out where your scoring pace needs to be. But you don't want to go to the U.S. Open with the idea in mind that I'm trying to bowl 240 every game. You're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble doing that. Whereas if you think, okay, my goal is 2-0, 2-teen, make spares, pick up a double here and there and move on, and then you find a pair that is a little bit more open. Say you see a little bit more friction to the right. Now you can kind of go a little bit more into attack mode and try and take that pair to 250, 260. But then if you go to the next pair, it's right back, it's tough. Go back to your 190 to 2-0 pace and bowl at whatever the lane is giving you, instead of you all of a sudden looking up and thinking, well, I've got a double in the 10th for 140. So
that's a good point. And I think that's something maybe that we touched on at Storm University as well, haven't we? We've talked a little bit about just kind of being aware of the lane conditions and understanding the scoring paces and trying to get the most that you can out of it. But like you had mentioned, same thing goes, and for example, maybe you're going, strike, spare, and it's a 2-game sweeper. Well, a 4-10 set might be nice under one circumstances, but other circumstances, if all you're getting is strike 9, it's time to make some kind of a drastic, bold move to see what you got to do to get 10 when you hit the pocket rather than 9.
Right, you definitely have to be totally aware of the environment in general, whether it be the scoring pace, the people that are on your squad. If I walk into bowl the 11 o'clock squad and I see 50 bowlers, I walk in on the 1 o'clock squad and there's 20 bowlers, 25 bowlers, there's a potential of a lower or higher scoring pace based on either the quality of player, how they're playing the lane, so on and so forth. So you really have to kind of be aware of what you're doing. And one thing that I always try to do is pay attention to what the pair ahead of me is doing. If I'm on 17 and 18 and I'm going to 25 and 26 next, when I'm not up, I may walk down there on 25 and 6 and just kind of watch a couple shots, see if I see some differences as to how that pair is playing, or even just to see what the scoring pace is like. You know, you can walk down there after that game's over, you look up and see the scores, nobody bowled over 180, and you think, wow, this pair is impossible. But if nobody on that pair was playing the lanes like you really can't gain a lot of information unless you actually physically saw what was going on. So always be around, aware of your surroundings.
And that used to, really be critical when you're bowling in the Open Championships, to go down and watch how the teams in front of you were finishing up, because then you'd have an idea where you were going to be starting for singles and doubles.
Right.
They have changed that format now for this year. For that kind of information doesn't help you as much. But what does help you is still going down for previous squads and seeing where they're starting out at. That's always a key thing, is what kind of surface are they using, what kind of balls, what part of the lane are they playing, and the more information, the better.
Well, I mean, as you know, every pair in every bowling center technically plays differently due to topography and other factors. I've learned over the years that the majority of the pairs in front of the control desk are the ones that hook the most in the bowling centers, because that's where the majority of the open play is. So if we walk in and we're on a pair that's right in front of the desk, there's a pretty good chance that it may hook more than some of the other pairs. The end pairs are generally different than the rest, depending on the procedures that the bowling centers use. If they don't use a burn pair, they just grab the machine, start on lane 1, and go.
What's that mean? Explain that just a little bit, Jeff. A burn pair, what does that mean?
Well, typically when a mechanic gets the lane machine out and they put it down and they just start running the machine for league, for say your 6 o'clock league, and the machine's not fully calibrated, the brush or the roller isn't fully saturated, the pattern may not be truly laid out on that first run. It may take a lane or so before it actually starts to really develop as to what you're laying down. So what a lot of places will do is they will, for instance, bring the machine out on 1 and 2. They'll run lanes 1 and 2 both to get the machine fully calibrated and ready. Then they'll go back and they'll strip and re-oil lanes 1 and 2 again and go on through the rest of the house. And they'll actually get a much truer sense of the pattern by doing that. Now, when you have a more difficult pattern than a house pattern, one thing you have to keep in mind is every time you strip and re-oil the lane, you're taking what we call lane memory away. So if you run a house pattern and then the next time you run the lanes is with a sport compliant pattern, the very first time you run it, it will play at its easiest, unless you double strip and get as much of the house pattern off that lane before you ever run, the challenge pattern on top of it. So that's always a key is, like we talked about, paying attention to your environment. Whenever we would bowl on tour or regional, I would always be aware of, if we had a pro-am the night before, did they run the house pattern? If they did, what lanes did they use? That way you might say, okay, they only ran 1 through 24 with the house pattern. The rest of them weren't touched. 1 through 24 may actually play a little bit differently because of that. Even though in a lot of cases they would double strip, there was still just enough of that memory left that would give you just a little bit of lane help.
Now, I don't know about you, but what that would tell me if I'm bowling the next day is I switch pairs and say, like you had mentioned, 1 through 24 there. As I move out of that section of lanes and I throw my first shot and it reacts differently, I have more trust or more confidence that the shot I threw was a quality shot. I'm more willing to accept the difference in the lane condition rather than the fact that, well, that was just me and I do the same thing again and I leave another big 4 or another 2-8-10.
Right. That's part of the information gathering process. I mean, when you have all this information available to you, and you can make your judgments, your guesses, so to speak, a little bit better, that sure helps a lot. You're not just strictly relying on yourself to feel like you have to throw it perfect every time. now you can actually, take some of that information and apply it to how you're playing the lanes.
And all these little, tidbits of information, you put this all together along with, knowing your equipment, knowing the strategy on playing the lanes, understanding the moves on the lane, understanding when to make those physical adjustments in your game. You put that all together, and that's really the difference that, winning a tournament versus just cashing versus missing the cash. People ask me all the time, especially when I was a tour rep, what's the difference between somebody like Pete Weber, the elite, versus the other ones who seem to be so good, but they're not winning the titles. What's the difference? And sometimes it's the natural ability or physical talent that Pete Weber has, and other times it's just flat out strategy and knowledge and understanding their game, where they're almost can almost outthink their opponent when they're bowling in a tournament environment.
And every one of the great players out there is totally different. You have guys like Pete, who is just such a raw, natural talent. Pete can do anything he wants to with a bowling ball. Guys like Sean Rash. Sean is a tremendous, gifted, physical bowler. Then you've got guys like Barnes, who is a true technician. He is constantly thinking, he is constantly tinkering. Same thing with Norm Duke. If you watch Norm's eyes, Norm is always in motion in his head. He's always thinking ahead. You've got a lot of guys that basically just kind of go out there and bowl. They don't really think a lot. They just kind of go bowl off of feel. You've got guys that may not be the great physical game bowlers. Perfect example is Ryan Schaefer. Ryan Schaefer may be the most underrated bowler in our sport, and he may not be the best physically, but nobody works harder than Ryan Schaefer, and nobody understands their ball roll, ball reaction better. He literally can outthink some opponents to a TV show.
And he really repeats shots too, extremely well.
Very good
like you
at
said,
that.
some people say, when you look at the style-wise, and there's a lot of great bowlers in history who are far from textbook, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of people who would have thought that, the bent elbow that you saw like in Earl Anthony a lot of times.
And Don Carter as well.
Don Carter was you could be successful with that type of a style.
The perfect analogy is Walter, and you and I both do a lot of time, coaching and working on physical games. Walter is somebody who you would never teach his style, but yet he's the greatest champion in PBA history. So he's got to be doing something right.
Right.
So,
and I'll give you an interesting story about Walter. Here's one for you. When I was down at Kegel, and this is a number of years ago when I was a tour rep, we were down there, had a little meeting, and he was down there, and that was kind of early on. It was still a few years in, but it was early on to when they had the CAT system was developed, and they had a pair that had CATs on there. And he was actually going through and throwing shots, and we'd say, okay, ball speed was, 17.3 miles an hour, and rev rate was 244, for example. And say, okay, now go ahead and throw this next shot. After we were kind of seeing it, and I was noticing he was kind of calling his shots. Okay, I'm going to raise my rev rate here, and I'm going to keep the same speed. And he'd throw the next shot, it'd be 17.3, and it'd be 264. And then he'd say, okay, I'm going to throw the next one. I'm going to move aboard right, keep the same speed, but lower my rev rate. And you'd look at the location, and he literally would hit, if he thought he was hitting 8 at the arrows, he'd be somewhere between 7.8 and 8.2 as far as cats would go, and he would repeat it. And that was eye-hand coordination. Again, not a textbook style, but boy, talk about being able to understand and know his own game and how to play the lanes.
And then you take guys like David Ozio, Brian Voss, guys that physical style may be, if not the best ever, top 5. If somebody came up to me today and said, who has the best physical game in the history of bowling, I immediately say David Ozio. I just was such a big fan of David's, and I thought he threw the ball so unbelievably good for so long, and he won a lot, and he was a great champion. But for whatever reason, he didn't win more. And a little funny story about David. We were doing a trade show up in Red Wing, Minnesota, this little bowling center, and all the manufacturers were there represented, like most trade shows. And we had a challenge match. There was a bunch of us bowling. We did a little 3-game sweeper, and after the sweeper was over, the trade show was winding down, and guys started kind of doing some trick shots and having fun, and there's still a good-sized crowd around. At the time, we had several exempt guys there. I think Barnes was there, Wes was there, but we were having fun. And David, this was back when they were doing the trick shots on TV, and throwing the ball through chairs was popular. Parker kind of made that in vogue of tracing the ball through chairs, right? But they would use the bigger chairs. Well, David goes in the bar and gets a bar stool, and he puts the bowling ball through the legs of this bar stool just to see if it would fit. And there was literally about 1/4 of an inch left to right and up and down of clearance. 1/4 of an inch. I'm not exaggerating. And he threw it through that bar stool 9 times in a row on the lane.
Really?
Now, he didn't strike every time, but
Right.
he made it through that bar stool 9 times in a row.
Wow.
That's 9 shots within 1/4 of an inch of each other that he repeated those. So,
Yeah.
he was awesome.
Yep. Yeah. He and Marshall Holman were my 2 idols growing up, and David Ozio, I always admired just that the balance at the foul line and the fluid swing that he had. Just like I said, everything that was textbook. And then Marshall Holman had that stronger, more powerful roll. Just that release, was a little bit more aggressive. So those were my 2 idols growing up. And
it's kind of impressive with Marshall to see how great he was with how early his timing was. We could never teach that now,
Right.
Being that early. But that was pretty incredible how he might be the only person I've ever seen that was that strong that had that early of timing.
Yeah.
I would really like to see what he could have done back then, power-wise, if his timing was same as Mark Roth's.
Yeah.
I think those two would have, had a lot of interesting battles, if that was the case.
A buddy of mine from Kansas, Salina, Kansas, there, Mark Birkenbein. We were always joking.
Oh, Mark Turpentine. Yeah, I know Mark.
We were always joking. What was some people talk about stumbling blocks or hurdles to overcome in their bowling game, and Marshall Holman, I tell you, the year that he signed the contract where he had to wear tennis shoe style bowling shoes,
the Nike
was about
ones,
the downfall of his. That took him a while to get past that, and that was the very moment he started. You started seeing some of his hopping. At the foul
Right.
line, you'd see him start to hop and skip a little bit. But when he was wearing the more traditional, real long sliding bowling shoes, that was when he was, almost unbeatable.
He was Player of the Year, I think, right before then.
Yes, he was. Cameron Foster looking terrific here on our featured pair on 17 and 18. He actually has the front 4s throwing the IQ Tour Pearl.
With the gold ball.
Yep, a lot of strikes with the gold ball, I tell you. Cameron's an outstanding young player. He's a standout collegiate player, and recently competed up in Boise, Idaho, and the PBA Western Tour Regional up there. Did quite well, made the finals, and I think he finished in the top 5. Player out of Utah. Watch the ball come off his hand. Is very, very, very clean. A lot of rev rate. Good roll on the ball. Very little effort at the bottom. He's a good model for power and fluidity. See if he can make it 5.
Good, solid, controlled motion down lane. That's what you want to see. Even with a ball that does like to change direction, looks like there's just a little bit of surface on it to kind of help blend it out. But, that mix of a little bit of surface with good, solid forward roll is what's really going to make the difference.
Yeah, an axis rotation. That's what we talk about a lot. If you have a ball rotating end over end, when it sees friction, it's not going to take off and overreact on you.
Right.
But consequently, if you have your hand away on the side of the ball, it's good for creating hook down lane, but on tournament conditions, it can end up making the lanes play very sensitive or much more challenging than they need to be. And that's why John Jowdy and really David Ozio and Brian Voss, we were talking about earlier, 2 very good players, especially when they got under U.S. Open type conditions, that roll the ball end over end, straighten it out, controls that break point better, makes the ball motion a lot more predictable even when the lanes are real challenging.
I think that was the main reason why we developed the IQ Tour And after that, the IQ Tour Pearl is to give bowlers that maybe didn't have the ability to change hand positions and things like that, to give them a little bit of help with the bowling ball to be able to create that same type of motion down lane. So,
yeah, the tour name, when you see that on the bowling ball, is generally going to mean that it's a little bit more stable, because that's what you're looking for when you're looking at a tournament type of a player that's bowling on conditions that are a little bit tougher. You're going to generally benefit from having a weight block design that's a little bit more controllable or stable. And when you're looking at the tech data, when you're looking at the specs on a bowling ball, you want to be looking at the area where it has differential. You know, in the range that we have for what's allowable by USBC to have it still be a USBC approved or certified bowling ball, we have a range between 0 and .060. So a lot of our premier line balls, for example, differential-wise, you would notice would be .044 all the way up, you know, .055, 056, 058, up in that range, which would be a high flare potential, high differential. But then you look at a ball like the IQ Tour and you're looking at a more stable shape, it's going to produce less flare, which is going to ultimately give you a little bit more control. Now it is unique though in terms of there's a lot of balls on the market that do have less differential, but generally they're more like low performance, a little lower end, entry level bowling ball, designed, you know, to hook less or create less motion. But this is unique because it also has a very low RG, so it revs up fast even though it's a more stable design.
for those of you that remember the old Tour Power that we had years ago, very similar motion to that ball, just updated by today's standards with updated core and cover stock. But same basic concept as what we had back then with the Tour Power. I remember I had a Tour Power that had, I'm trying to remember, it was almost an 8-inch pin. So the pin was, you know, thrown way up above the fingers, and the CG was down almost in my thumb. Man, that ball was unbelievable.
Yeah, the Tour Power, remember when we brought that ball out, was actually when we had the Nationals, was in Billings, Montana.
Right.
The Open Championships, and David Haynes, who's one of my teammates and still is doubles teammate, he came out there for the team event with a matte finish at a sanded. Back at the time, this was before Aberlon, so people were still using either Scotch-Brite or sandpaper. And I want to say he had pretty much like a fresh green pad, quite a bit of surface on there, but again, low flare, low differential. And everybody in Billings, if you remembered, was trying to play. There was a good shot on the gutter, one of the last times there really was a real nice shot outside, right? And he was lined up playing just inside a third arrow, wasn't getting the ball out that far, and with his rev rate, you had to know it was going to be a pretty controllable motion. And at the end of the first game, we got down there. I was bowling with Ed Bauer, actually. They were a crossing team. Got down there, kind of leaned down, got down real low, close to the lane level on the approach. And you could see all these lines out there around 5 to 10 or so at the arrows. And then there was a dry strip at 17, where David was. I'm telling you, he had the front 8. And you know, the first game of Nationals, a lot of times you get your heart's, you know, your heart beats racing, you're feeling the nerves and the excitement and all that stuff. And I'm telling you, cool as can be, he walked out and just labeled it. And if we had cats back then on that pair, he didn't miss by half a board at the arrows for all of his shots in the whole game. And he was the only one playing in there, and he shot 260. And then of course, we moved in and couldn't make it look near as good.
Right. You know, interesting that you mentioned David. You know, he's another one of the tremendous amateur players that have been bowling these types of events for years and years, and lives out here in Vegas. And you know, his name's always, you know, around the high rollers and everything else like that. So looks like the scores are a little bit higher on this squad than last one. I see a lot of 230, 40, and 50 paces going on in game one. You know, on one hand, I attribute that a little bit to the caliber bowler on the squad. Looks like it may be a little bit higher than what we had earlier, but also as the day goes on and the lanes start to transition, they calm down a little bit, and I don't want to say they get easier, but they get a little bit more playable.
And you'll also notice too, a lot of the bowlers here bowled the squad before, so they may have figured something out as well, you know, by re-entering.
Kind of like what we talked about with the information
Yeah.
gathering process, to where you learn from what you saw earlier.
Yep, and Cameron Foster, you see here he's got the front 7 getting up on lane 18 in the 8th frame. And we do have an incentive as well if you're using the Storm bowling ball and have the Storm logo patch or logo shirt that you're wearing. We do have a $300 bonus that we award, so we'd love to offer him $300 here with a perfect game. Took another pretty good shot. That's 10 in the pit. Well, you know, when you're a college kid too, you need money.
Absolutely.
Right? So maybe that's a little extra motivation for him right here. Get a little extra bonus, not just make the cut, but
you don't even have to be a college kid to need money. So,
especially when you gamble a little bit, don't you?
yeah, we had a long conversation with Louie last night about the whole, you know, every time I come to Vegas, I leave here broke. You know, I said, you know, he was telling stories about having to borrow money from Brad and this, ring 10.
Hit it. Yeah.
But, you know, Louie talked about every time he comes to Vegas, he leaves broke. I says, well, maybe, Louie, the problem's you. It's not Vegas, it's you.
Yeah, you see money being made. You know, you walk down, you see some of the bells and lights going off in the casinos, and you see this person hits this jackpot, and this guy gets a big, you know, big win or big hit on the blackjack table, and they shove all those purple or green or black chips in front of them, and you know, it definitely makes you think maybe that could be me. But that really is one of the cool things with having the tournament here in Las Vegas too. Is what a fun place to come. That's part of what makes these
there's so much
successful.
to do while you're out here.
So Cameron had what a nice run there at a perfect game. Had the front 8, still looking really good, of course, for qualifying just because of that. Because he's, you know, we're part of our 3-game qualifying set here. Looking really solid. Don't know what he had to start, but
Brad Louie and Mike Flanagan are on their way back. They had to go run a few errands. Mike had texted me just a little while ago, said that they should be back soon. So as long as they don't stop off or something.
As long as they don't stop and gamble. And we should have some tournament results posted on the website as well. Usually get those updates done at night. Has qualifying scores from earlier that day. We'll have to verify that, but go to trueamateurtournaments.com or high-roller.com. We also do, Louie does a nice job getting daily recaps updated on our e-news at stormbowling.com, so you can check there as well.
And along those same lines is the Storm YouTube channel. Lots of great content there. You know, we mentioned earlier all the stuff that you know, they filmed and did at Bowl Expo that I know Mike is archiving a lot of that right now and getting it posted, you know, on the website. But there's a lot of great tips, a lot of great features, ball reviews, highlights from some of the PBA shows and other events that you know, we've all been a part of. So there's lots of good content on the YouTube channel. We put a lot of time and effort into that. That's one of Louie's main jobs, is to do that. So that's another good avenue for you to kind of go to learn a little bit more about our company and some of the bowlers and so on and so forth. So make sure you visit those pages.
Harry Mickelson, great former Team USA player and senior tour player. Now he's on 19 and 20. So you've got 230 possible, skipping up in the 9th right here. Be able to see him on the right side of the screen, see his ball motion at least, see the ball going down the lane here on lane 20.
You know, again, we've got several scores in the 230 to 250 range out there. And it looks like this is game 3 of this set already. So scores are a little bit higher this round than what they were last round. So once again, we will have one more qualifying round coming to you at 3 o'clock, Steve?
It's at 2:30.
2:30.
Yep. So we'll be starting up here shortly.
Yeah, we'll take a short break after this round is over while they get the bowlers changed, get everybody ready for their practice. We'll step away from a little bit, take a little bit of a break, and then we'll be back shortly after that. So thanks, Brad, for chiming in on the link for the tournament results and stuff. So for those of you in the chat room, go to that link. That'll give you the information that you're looking for as far as scores and also information about the tournament format, prize fund, so on and so forth. So, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier, the Buddy's mystery pot scores back up over $900, and it was 189 last.
Ooh.
Yeah, they drew 189. So
Ooh.
I've heard it as high as 263 and as low as 170 something so far. So
189, a pretty common score.
I remember it's been probably 4 or 5 years ago. We were bowling the Gavi in Detroit team event, and it was me and myself, and Schlem was bowling with us, and Danny McClellan, and a big team tournament. They do a great job with it. There was over 100 teams there at the Thunder Bowl, and I mean they're coming around getting money for brackets and game pots and this and that, and they said $5 for the mystery pot. I'm like, what's a mystery pot? Yeah, I'd never heard of it before. So I just gave them $5 and off they went. And they drew it every game, and I think the second game I had like, I don't know, 211. It wasn't much. So I wasn't very happy with that game until they drew the mystery pot number at 211 for like $700. So
Can't win if you're not in.
nope, absolutely not.
All right, well, 268, Cameron has awesome, awesome bowling there.
We had a question if we were still giving a ball away today. I think he's referring to what Jimmy Callahan said yesterday. He wanted to come up with a trivia question. If anybody can answer it, we're going to give a ball away. If we can find Jimmy and he's come up with one, I'll hold him to that for you. So, but we have to find him first because he said that was coming out of his budget.
We can give away his budget, can't we?
Well, yeah, I think
we can take care of that.
I think
for
we
him.
should be deputized to give away Jimmy's budget.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Cameron Foster with that 268, that last game shot 753.
That should be a pretty solid number.
Great bowling, great bowling on this. Absolutely.
I've seen a few 770s, a couple 780s. We had the 814 last night, and then Cameron 770. So there's definitely some numbers out there to be had. It's just a matter of getting the right matchup in the right part of the lane and being able to get your ball to go through the pins the right way.
And that's why the marathon entry is such a good choice. You know, for $895, you get the 2 Storm balls, you get 5 qualifying squads, 5 chance squads, and then you get a spot as well in the Storm Challenge finals. So you get a lot of things. Plus, you get the match play bonus as well. So I mean, you get a lot of good stuff for your money, and that might be what it takes, which is get out. You know, get shoot up, try out some different balls in your line, try some different surfaces, play some different parts of the lane, kind of get it all figured out. Once you get it all matched up, then you're off to the races, and you can.
You know, I don't know about you, but you know, if I'm coming out here to bowl an event like this, you know, one of the things I'm going to do is I want to bowl as many squats as I can. I want to, you know, have it as many opportunities as I can to win money, whether it be in brackets every squad or if it's the little side events, so on and so forth. So, you know, if you're going to come out here, you might as well go ahead and invest the extra money and just spend the week bowling. Bowl as much as you possibly can that's where you're going to get your best opportunity to win some money. So,
yeah, and that's why we have the sweepers, and you've got the other side events that you can kind of parlay.
Right.
Parlay.
And also take advantage of the Storm Showcase area with the matchmaker balls, being able to try the high road pearl, the Marvel S, some of the balls that aren't totally available to the public yet. Be able to see the motion of those, make a good determination whether they're going to fit into your arsenal or not. Hopefully so.
Yeah, and then the nice thing we have too is we do have down there in the matchmaker set some of the sinks and the IQ Tour pearls as well. So you can go down and kind of see, okay, is this the right layout for me? Do I need to go a little shinier, a little coarser? Do I need to go with more flare, less flare, adjust the layout, see if that does what I want it to do on the tournament conditions? And so that's why those lanes have been busy down here. That's why there's a lot of people bowling down there.
It's been nice to see.
Yeah.
214 was the mystery score for this squad. So once again, those scores are kind of all over the map. So $1,050 for the mystery score.
$1,050. I don't hear any screams quite yet, so we don't know if we have any winners, but for $1,050. Be the most money I ever made for shooting 214.
Exactly.
I'll tell you that.
Well, that concludes our second qualifying round. Steve and I are going to step away for a little while, take a little bit of a break. We will be back soon. I know Mike Flanagan's on his way back, so he'll probably be joining us in the booth. Maybe we can talk Wendy McPherson into getting up here in the booth with us, or maybe somebody else. Tell some more stories, entertain you guys a little bit more. But Steve, thanks for joining me again for this round. Appreciate you coming up here and keeping me company.
You got it.
I didn't have to do this solo. But guys, thanks for joining us. We'll be back in a little while. Enjoy the break.